Hello, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I know it's afternoon somewhere. My name is Valerie Adams, and I want to thank you for joining us today on Kingdom Culture TV, the Writers Forum. And today we're doing part two of our guest with Ingrid Dupuy. She is the founder of Charity Trade Foundations Incorporated. She is assisting communities in Liberia and impacting the world without segregation. I do want to thank you again, Ingrid, for coming in today and just stopping by so we can continue our conversation. We had such a powerful conversation around serving communities. Um, but today we want to talk about and bring awareness to domestic violence and domestic abuse. And in our last conversation, it did come up, and it did kind of like we had to take a deep breath and realize that, but for the grace of God, we're here, and how domestic violence affects people behind the walls we don't even know about. So we're going to talk about today domestic violence and bringing awareness. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Valerie. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me back to have this discussion with you.
You are so welcome. I know that right now in the Senate, they just struck a bill, a bipartisan bill to support domestic violence and support women or men who may be in abusive situations. We can't just say it's women, but there are some men who can be in abusive situations as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Um, just to catch us up, tell us a little bit about your story.
So would you like to know more about my domestic violence experience, or are you referring to the charity?
We're going to talk about the charity and bring us to that point as well with the domestic abuse.
Okay, so for those who are just tuning in, I am the founder and co-CEO of Charity Trade Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that provides basic needs throughout the globe. We are registered in Liberia, Africa, as well as the United States, and we are expanding globally to, help provide basic needs to those in need and solve health disparities and socioeconomic issues and things of that nature, so that we can change the world one project at a time.
Wow, wow. Where can they find your website, or how can they support the charity?
Sure. So our website is www.charitytradefoundation.org, and we can be emailed at charitytradefoundation@gmail.com, as well as we have a GoFundMe on the GoFundMe app for Charity Trade Foundation as well, if you'd like to donate and support our cause.
Great, great. How long have you been working with the charity?
So unofficially, 5 years now. We became legal last year in September 7th in Liberia, Africa, and October 17th here in Connecticut. And so we've been working hard to funnel funds over to other parts of the world in order to solve these issues, especially with COVID and the lack of shipping and resources. Sometimes it's best to just funnel funds and allow them to and get the problem solved in the area that is needed.
And when you say funnel funds, just send the donations there through the charity so that they can get the food, they can get the equipment, they can get everything they need, the clothes and different things.
Correct. So for instance, recently I provided food for there. So I have a co-CEO who resides in Liberia. And so I have of course, business bank account here in America. So whenever anything is donated, it gets funneled through the business bank account for clearing. And then those funds are then forwarded to whatever place or project that is in need.
Great. So, we know that you're working with Charity Trade Foundation, and I just want to say that you look very pretty today. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your story, whatever you want to share regarding that relationship And how are you handling relationships right now, um, coming out of abusive situations?
Whew, Valerie, that one is definitely um, an interesting question. Um, First and foremost, just out of protection for the people involved, I'm not going to mention any names, but the young man who I was dealing with at the time, um, was an alcoholic, and he would black out and abuse me, and almost act like he didn't remember what was going on. Now, mind you, I was in this relationship for 6 years before anything, I'm gonna say in hindsight, went awry, but there were some red flags that I honestly should have paid more attention to. Because when people tell you who you are, believe them, believe them. So when I first met the young man, I was a lot younger. I'm not going to disclose my age at this time. And so we began dating and eventually ended up living together. And the gentleman was extremely jealous of where I would go, who I would hang out with, even jealous of me being with my mother. Things that you normally wouldn't have someone feel competition with. And so when the first time that it got physical was because I was going out to a party with some friends of mine, and the gentleman said that I looked too nice to be going out alone. And so my young naive self thought, you know, hey, he thinks I'm cute or he really, really likes me. Little did I know, that was his way of trying to control what I wore and where I went and how I presented myself. And even though I wasn't like scantily clad or anything, um, he just didn't like any sort of attention on me from anyone else for that matter. And so over time, things just got worse. And what I would tell anyone is I quickly found out that I'm not qualified to treat or rehabilitate anyone in a situation of such where you're not in control, they're not in control, and they need help that you just can't provide. One, because you're too close to it, and two, I'm not certified in that area. So as far as dealing with relationships now, after that relationship, I went, oh my goodness, years without even thinking about trying to have another boyfriend or wanting to be involved with anyone. I focused on therapy, I focused on healing. Um, and even still to this day, there are certain things that trigger me as far as that's concerned. So even if I meet a gentleman today and the gentleman exhibits certain red flags, it's a complete turn off right away. Because I prayed through that situation. I was like, God, if I ever get out of this, please help me have the discernment not to go down that road again, for trying to please someone else or trying to be everything for the other person. I had to start to be everything for myself first before I could pour myself into other people.
Wow, that's good. That's good. I'm glad that you recognize your triggers and what
Yeah,
are red flags for you. A red flag for you may not be a red flag for me because I've not had your experience. So I cannot tell you, I can't tell you how to feel or how to judge your relationships at the end of the day. So that's good. You are aware of the spirit of abuse because it is a spirit. It is a spirit. Um, how do you feel about I know now you know me.
mm,
I don't have questions set up. We just have
let's just
conversation.
talk about it. Whatever comes to your mind, if
But
God wants it to come out, it's coming out.
okay. Well, how do you feel about and I know I've talked to people, I've dealt with abuse, I've spoken with people. You do understand the control, you do understand the red flags. Whenever there's a spirit of control, you it's something almost that says, okay, hold up, that's way too much. That's way too much control that you're trying to take right now that I'm not trying to give, because it could lead to that. Not that is that. It could lead to that. Some things we can identify readily, and some things we cannot. Um, how do you, what would you say to someone that's in an abusive relationship right now, but feel like they don't have a way out? Um, it could be because of the kids. It could be a job related abuse. It could be a number of things. It could be friendships.
Right.
What would you say to people, or, and no, we're not doctors and we're not counselors, but we do share our experience so that somebody else may gather some information or gather some wisdom around it. What would you say to somebody that's in that type of situation? Because you said you were in that situation for a minute. How how did you get out? What did it take for you to get out?
So first I would like to
I asked
say
two
that,
questions, so so whatever,
yes.
however you want to answer.
So first I would like to say that we are all real people living real experiences and having real reactions to the things that come our way. And so for someone who's in a situation and not sure how to get out or if they should get out, um, I would say start actively assessing what's going on. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're in the midst of it. But if it feels bad to you, no matter whether or not anybody else justifies that feeling, it feels bad to you. And your feelings are important. And so first, to connect to your inner self to say, okay, something is not right. This doesn't feel right. Even if you think you're being extra because you've been in a situation before and you're feeling triggered. If you're feeling triggered, there is something that is triggering you. And so whether or not you haven't dealt with it with therapy or whatever, if you're feeling triggered, if you're feeling unsafe, then make the move, make the call. There's a domestic violence hotline that one can reach out to, be it male or female. And that number is 1-800-799-7233, or you can simply text START in all caps, START, to 88788. And so the domestic violence hotline is there to not only help you through the situation, but help you get resources to move away from the situation that you are in. For me, what it took for me to leave, and in some people's cases, they go through repeat scenarios, and the scenario lasts for years. So it becomes where you go from knowing someone and everything is great in the beginning to little things happening. And so you forgive the little things and the things get bigger and they say they'll never do it again. And then they do it again. And my situation was quite violent. The gentleman would throw me around like a rag doll. He pulled out a machete on me and put it to my neck and tried to snap my neck and told me that I wasn't going to make it and, I wasn't going to live. And I was thrown down a flight of steps. I have 10 screws in my neck as a result. And so while all of these things were happening, life is funny in that somewhere in my mind, I thought that when he was trying to so-called nurse me back to health or help me, that was a sign of love or compassion, but it was really just a setup for the next downfall. And so it was a repeated, there were repeated offenses. And every time he would be inebriated, he would come over and I would say, want to pick with me of sorts. And so just to state that I've never had a fight in my life. Like I've never fought anyone. I'm not a fighter. Some people grow up fighting in school or whatever, but that was never my case. And so this was the first real violent act that had happened to me. So that in itself threw me off kilter because I wasn't used to being treated like that by another human being, especially someone who stated that they loved me. Um, then I would justify, oh, we've been together 6 years. Nothing happened before, you know, but in my rational mind, I had to be like, well, something is happening now. And there's something that's happening doesn't feel like before. All of the kind gestures, all of the support, all of the good things that came before it was immediately negated by the abuse. And so it overshadowed my life. I became more distant from family and friends because I was afraid of his reactions. Um, there were times when other people would turn a blind eye to what was going on because they didn't want to get involved. Not my family per se, because my family was extremely supportive. But it did take for me to speak up and for things to happen for them to know what was going on. So it does take a bit of courage to be able to pull yourself together in a time of such turmoil and tell someone else something is not right. I don't feel right. This is not a good situation. And so as a result, when I was thrown down the steps, my daughter found me at the bottom of the steps, unconscious, and she called the police. It was a very interesting experience because the first policeman who showed up, the gentleman had ran out the house after the assault. And so when the policeman showed up, the policeman actually tried to arrest me and said that we were fighting. And so I'm not sure where anyone else is located, but in some states, even in a said domestic violence situation, if you're fighting back, then it's assault on both parties. It's not necessarily assault on one party. And so the first police officer who showed up was essentially saying, hey, did you hit him back? Because if you hit him back, we would have to arrest you as well, things like that. Mind you, the ambulance was called. I was fitted for a neck brace. I had bruises all over. And so it was clear that even if I had fought back, which I didn't even have a chance to, I definitely didn't win that fight. Yeah. So thank God there was a second police officer who pulled up on the scene. And the second police officer pretty much checked the first police officer and told him, obviously, she's the one who's been abused. They called the gentleman from their cell phone. He actually answered, and they asked him to turn himself in. They later caught up with him and arrested him. He only received a few months in prison and was released based on programming. So, if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous and you go to anger management, you go to all of these things, we will release you from custody, So then I had to go through, what do you call it? I had to go through the court system in order to, gain custody of one of my children. I had to not only go to parental counseling, there was just a lot of steps. And I honestly felt like in that case, the system was unfair, only because I understand, the case where they say, okay, we want to keep the families together, or things like that. But if I apply and am granted a restraining order, obviously that's an unsafe situation. And so I just felt like it wasn't handled with as much compassion or care at that time. But they have made strides since that happened years ago, where, people are being taken more seriously, especially during COVID. There was a lot of uptick in domestic violence. And so they've been responding quicker and taking things more seriously. But at the time that it happened initially, I just didn't feel as protected. And you almost get to the point where you feel like something has to happen before someone steps in. There wasn't a proactive step to protect you from the outcome, because people normally say, oh, well, if you haven't committed the crime yet, then you're not guilty. But what happens when something is leading up to a crime? What about all of those stages? And so those are the things that I feel like need to be addressed even still to this day, is that, you know, we have to start to listen to people and look at signs for when things start to go wrong, and give them the coping skills on how to remove themselves from a toxic situation before it gets out of control.
Good, good, good. Um, it is something that you have to plan and plan for your safety,
Yes.
plan for um, your livelihood, and making sure that even as you make the necessary moves, that you feel safe in those moves that you'll make. For anyone that's listening, it is something that you should, you know, make someone aware of, and make the plans, and or have the conversations if you feel safe enough to. It may just be certain things are happening that could start something. So you want to be aware and have those conversations before it goes into another direction. I think something that you said, you were in this relationship for a long time, and the first time something happened, you got nursed by the abuser.
Yes.
Um, it's like somebody punching you and then come and says, "Oh, let me put some ice on it for you."
Exactly.
Like the psychosis of the abuse, number one, is layered. Then you have the fictitious act or the falsehood of love, because abuse is not love. Abuse is not love. Okay, let's get that clear.
So
Nursing someone that you hurt intentionally is not love. So just bring it. I just thought that was interesting because it happens. You feel
right.
like, oh, I won't forgive him this time because, oh, he didn't mean it. It's not gonna happen again. And he even says it's not gonna happen again. I don't know what
Right.
happened. I was just upset. It's not you. I was upset about something else. And then the next time it happens, you're going like, well, so I just applaud you for sharing your story, and for being an advocate for change, just bringing the awareness. I know that this is American Heart Association Month. I know there's certain months that's Domestic Violence Month, but we're in a season of love and healing and peace. And we want to bring the awareness and make sure that that we love, that we are being loved and not abused, that we're being loved and not abused, and that we have healthy relationships. So
Yeah.
moving forward, do you feel like you're in a place for a healthy relationship, or do you just feel like, oh, Valerie, oh, that's too much, I want to work on it? Where
I
are
do.
you? Where are you? Where are you?
I feel like I'm in a place for a healthy relationship.
Good.
I can honestly say that I've done the work, so to speak. And so what a lot of people don't realize is after you've gone through a traumatic situation, your brain doesn't necessarily process the situation the way it's supposed to. So in instances where you have PTSD, that's not filed away correctly in your brain. And so certain things will trigger you and it'll just bring it back up. you would feel like you're in that situation all over again, even if the situation is seemingly safe, you know? Um, so, so there was like a moment when, you know, a while actually, where I didn't even trust my own feelings. I didn't trust, you know, any of those things. I didn't trust how I felt about someone else. If if it was okay for me to trust my own gut or trust my own instincts, because going through the domestic abuse really caused me to question everything about who I thought I was in my decision-making process. It made me question whether or not the decisions that I was making was valid. Was I over accusing someone for being angry? Did they have the right to be angry in that situation? What was my part in it? Did I contribute anything to fuel the interaction or anything like that? So I've been in therapy since, and so I still attend therapy, not only for domestic violence, but just for my own peace of mind and to make sure that things are staying above board. You know, sometimes it helps to be able to have someone to run things off of who's not personally connected to your life. And so I'm also an advocate for mental health, you know, and I feel like it's important that we break the stigma that, you know, if you go to if you're involved in mental health, you're quote unquote crazy or anything of that nature. And so it was like, you know, having to go through that taught me that I was just a person who needed help going through a real situation.
That's a dog.
Yes, my puppy. I have a Yorkie,
Oh,
and he's very jealous right now because
I know he hears you talking, and he's like, "What?"
yes, he hears you and he wants to talk to you, and so he's really like actually over here trying to make words and talk to you. So he's like, "Wow, wow, wow." Be quiet, Shaft, please. Okay, be good for my.
Okay. Well, baby,
He's
we're almost finished. We're almost finished, baby. Okay, so here we go. Um, again, share with us the number that if someone just needs some assistance or just need to reach out to the hotline, the domestic violence hotline. Share that number again, and then we'll just wrap it up.
definitely. So the domestic violence hotline, again, is 1-800-799-7233. And you can simply text START in all caps, START, to 88788.
All right, all right. Well, thank you again, Ingrid Dupuy, for coming in and talking to us. We love Charity Trade Foundations, incorporating the work that you're doing there in Liberia, building the work, sustaining the work, and blessing the people. Thank you again for coming and sharing your story. And it's so important that we just continue to bring the awareness. I know we're living in a society where things are changing. We're dealing with all kinds of things with the global pandemic and even coming out of this pandemic. Just want to make sure that we are continuing to bring the awareness to supporting communities, supporting initiatives and causes, and just doing our kingdom culture work. Thank you again, Ingrid,
Yes.
and you have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure, and you do the same, Valerie.
Thank you.